Chris Hensley is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member of FINRA SIPC, investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Houston First Financial Group are not affiliated.
The Houston Midtown chapter of the Society for Financial Awareness presents Money Matters with your host, Christopher Hensley.
Good morning, everybody. You're listening to Money Matters. I'm Chris Hensley. The time is now 11 a.m. We've got a great show lined up for you today. According to a 2019 annual survey from the National Endowment for Financial Education, 8 out of 10, now that's 79% of U.S. adults will set a financial New Year's resolution for 2019. So if so many adults have financial well-being as a goal, why is it often difficult for them to get there? Our guest today is Billy Hensley, and he is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Endowment for Financial Education. No relations, even though his last name is Hensley. We are not related, but he will be joining us very, very shortly to do kind of a deep dive into this topic, as well as to introduce us to what is the National Endowment for Financial Education, what are they out there doing. So please stay tuned. Keep listening. But if you are a longtime listener of the show, you know we always reserve just the first few moments of the show to kind of tell you what's going on in the Houston and the Gulf Coast region when it comes to financial literacy. So we have had a busy, today is March 1st, 2019. We've had a very busy month of February. We had the Houston Hispanic Foundation's Career in Education Day 2019. That was last weekend. I participated that, I want to say the last 3 or 4 years, as they are one of the partners with Houston Money Week. This is a huge event each and every year. It takes up a floor of the George Brown Convention Center, and they will bus in middle school, high school students from all over Texas, really, to talk about college planning, scholarships, financial aid, career planning. Part of my favorite things that happen when we go to this is I get to see the different career panels. As a speaker, I do a talk on college planning, but I kind of get to wander around and see what's going on there. They have people from NASA. They've got people from the FBI there sitting in front of the students, and the students kind of get to pick their brain about STEM research, forensic science, really getting to talk to people who do these different careers. So it's kind of a really neat way for them to learn about possible careers, as well as how to position themselves to get into the schools that they want to get into. And when it comes to the financial side, how do they pay for it? So really, really good event. But this is just one event of a partner for Houston Money Week, which is in April of every year. Houston Money Week is in full force right now, so I would encourage people to go to HoustonMoneyWeek.org to find out more about Houston Money Week. It is a citywide initiative to help bring financial literacy classes, seminars, workshops to the Houston community, and it is absolutely free. As we get close to April, some of the nonprofit partners that are part of the VITA program offer free tax preparation for low to mid-income people, so you can log in there, put your zip code in there, and find out what your nearest VITA location is. Stay tuned. That is a dynamic website. It will update with all of the different events as they come live. I know last year we had well over 200 different events with different for-profit, nonprofits, banks, city government, universities, schools, you name it. We had a whole bunch of different groups participating in Houston Money Week last year, so we are super excited. And as we get closer to April, we'll see different events come online, so I'd encourage you to go back there. With that, let's go ahead and get Billy on the line here. Billy, are you there?
I am here.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, and let me say how wonderful it is to hear what Houston is doing. I mean, what a dynamic week of activities, and it's very impressive to hear.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you very much. We have been doing that for about 10 years now, and the program actually started out at the Federal Reserve and Chicago Federal Reserve, I think, and so we're just the Houston version of it, but it has grown over the years, so it is something we're very active in. Well, let me introduce you to the listeners so that they can get to know you a little bit better here. You are the President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Endowment for Financial Education, or what's known as NEFE. You replaced Ted Beck, who announced his retirement after 13 years leading the organization. So the organization has been around for quite some time. Tell us a little bit about what that is, what the National Endowment for Financial Education is.
Sure, and we call ourselves NEFE, the NEFE, just for shorthand because our name is very long. And sometimes people get confused because we sound like a federal agency or a DC type organization. We're actually not. We're a private operating foundation. We're headquartered in Denver, Colorado. And we come out of the history of financial planning in the sense that the College for Financial Planning started in Colorado in the early 70s, and we evolved from that. And now we're a separate organization, and we have our own funding. We don't raise money. We don't accept money from corporations or federal, state, local governments. We use our assets to promote the message of financial education and helping increase financial literacy. And so we do that in a sense that we don't want to necessarily tie ourselves to the fundraising side of it, because as a foundation we just use our asset base and the money we make from our endowment to use and fund our programs.
That's awesome. The fundraising portion can be, people can do that full time, and when you're out there trying to do good in the community, it's often the idea that you guys have your own funding there is fantastic. Tell us a little bit about the targeted demographic and who are typically using your services.
Sure. Well, we reach our mission, and we're trying to fulfill our mission in three ways. One of those is providing educational programming. A long-standing program that we've had for many years is NEFE's High School Financial Planning Program. And lots of Texas teachers use the High School Financial Planning Program in their classrooms, those who are teaching personal finance, or maybe a unit of personal finance in a civics course or an economics course, and we've been working with like the extension educators in the counties out in the state of Texas for many years, and other states across the country. We also have a college program called Cash Course, and that is in over 1,100 colleges and universities. It's a web-based program, and we have lots of consumer-facing websites too. Some that promote financial information, so you can learn more about a particular topic like retirement planning. Our most popular consumer-facing site for the average person is Smart About Money. So you can go in and you can learn about topics like how do you save for the unexpected, or how do you plan what's your transportation plan in your life, your financial transportation plan, and so forth. So educational programs, and we target teachers, we work with colleges, but we also try to reach just the general consumer, and we do that through intermediary organizations, people who work with clients in financial planning, but more importantly, we try to reach adult learners through things like workforce development initiatives in communities, or those who are doing community-based work, maybe through libraries, or the social workers who are trying to help their clients get on a stable financial ground. They use a lot of our resources. We also fund research, which we'll talk about today, I'm sure, as well as keeping the topic front and center, bringing awareness about the topic of personal finance and financial planning, and thinking about the future, because sometimes it's, we want to sweep that topic under the rug because it's difficult to approach, or maybe our economic life gets a little better and we stop feeling as stressed about money, but we want to make sure people don't forget the unexpected will come, and think about how to be prepared for that.
Well, absolutely. I want to talk about many different topics here, but one of the things that you just mentioned was the research. As I got on the website to prepare for the show today, which is for listeners who want to find out more, it's nefe.org. But the research tab, you guys have quite a bit of research on there. Can you tell me more about NEFE's plans for ongoing and future research?
Sure. We spend a lot of time trying to understand not only what people are doing, but how do we better educate the average learner within this topic. Personal finance is something that has a lot of noise around it. There's a lot of messaging competing for your dollars, and we want to make sure, how do we provide the right kind of financial information for people who are making, decisions in the short term, and more importantly, how do we improve financial education courses for young people and adults alike to better understand that. So a lot of our research is focused on that, to better understanding the context within which people make decisions, or more specifically, how do we improve those educational learning opportunities. Going in the future, we're probably going to look at things like, why are people planners and some are not planners, for example. What is the psychological disposition that helps inform that? We're looking at things like how do people, depending on what communities you live in or what your background is or what your level is, why do you make certain decisions? And, personally, I did lots of research of my own in the past, and I'm always interested in the why. And so NEFE is interested in the why, and we do that because we want to better create educational materials that serve the average learner, not just cater to those who have a predisposition to be work with a financial planner already.
Absolutely. So I love the organization and the resources that you guys have available there, the research. Let's kind of pivot into the quality of financial life. How do people feel about the quality of their financial lives?
Well, it's funny because you were talking about the 8 and 10 that made the financially focused resolution, and that's just, I think, a tip to Americans are generally optimistic people in nature. They're looking for the future. They want to improve. But a lot of the reason they're wanting to improve is because, a third of them say that they're worse off than they expected to be, a year ago. And almost half of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and that's a stressful thing on individuals and families alike. And some of that's tied to housing, just general debt they have. And then, sadly, women more than men actually place themselves in that category of feeling stressed, or maybe that their financial life isn't where they want it to be.
What do you see as the obstacles and setbacks that prevent people from achieving their financial goals?
Right. It's myriad, really. When you're thinking about the daunting amounts of debt that are in front of us as American citizens, and then expenses related to things like just general debt, but also, transportation costs and home costs and everything that goes with that. And the average worker's increase in salary hasn't offset really the cost of living that it takes to keep going. And when you think about the family who has a couple of kids and they have activities and, paying for activities and trying to save for retirement and preparing for college or some sort of training that their children would want to need at some point, it's a huge thing to overcome, and it's intimidating. But in general, people do want to set and follow a budget. I mean, our data show that. They want to do that. They want to make a plan to get out of the debt. They want to boost their retirement savings so they feel more secure in the future. It's just there's a lot of things competing for the dollar that comes out of each paycheck.
Absolutely. What recommendations would you give to people trying to get their financial house in order?
Just taking the good old-fashioned approach of sitting down, looking at everything you're spending money on, and everything is a decision. There are certain things you have to pay, things like insurance and so forth. But look at where you have flexibility and have the hard conversation with yourself, with your spouse, and even with your children to some extent on what's truly a need and what's a want, and how do you prioritize that. And it's not really a place to make judgments on what you're spending money on. It's just, what do I want to achieve and how do I get there? It's not an easy thing. Otherwise, we would all be completely, debt-free and living in this sort of utopia, financial utopia. But it's that old-fashioned sit down, assess where things are coming from, and then have discussions as a family about how do we set priorities here, and what gives me satisfaction in our budget, and in the sense of are we experienced people versus are we people who would rather be creating a more lovely home and so forth. So it really is about having that conversation, being open, and making a plan and doing your best to stick to that. And the most important thing that happens to us all, whether it'll be this year or next year, is that something unexpected will happen. Make sure you have enough flexibility in your budget to cover that, whether it be a deductible or some kind of unexpected health costs and so forth.
So one of the things that we talked about when we were thinking about putting the show together here was taxes or some of the perceived impact of the tax laws. As a financial advisor, I always have to make this disclaimer. I am not a CPA, so I don't provide direct tax advice. So seek a CPA tax professional for tax advice. However, we can talk very generally about taxes. And I was sitting with a client yesterday, and we are still having people that are have been affected by Harvey, who are still having to deal with that, and that played into their taxes. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you is what insights has NEFE research given you into what people are expecting this filing season, both in terms of process and expected refund?
Yeah. Well, a little over 90% of Americans, plan to file their 2018 taxes. And of those, about 40% plan on the standard deduction, and about 30% plan on the itemizing, and then the rest just don't know. They don't know yet until they get in there. But what's fascinating about this is that about 4 in 10 expect to pay about the same amount that they've paid in the past. I think that realization has started to change based on what I've been seeing in discussion around that. But, about 20% expect to pay less. I think that's fascinating because of so much discussion around tax policy the last 12 to 18 months as a society. And what does that mean? And what does that mean for me as an individual? What does that mean for my community and so forth? But the fact that only 20% expected to pay less, I thought was fascinating. Maybe Americans are actually a little more astute about what to expect with taxes than we were giving them credit for.
Absolutely. Maybe that expectation. Well, let's ask about this. What impact do you expect the implementation of the new tax law to have on people filing this season, and how will filing this year be different from previous years?
I think people, and this is just conjecture here, but I think people are going into it with a little more apprehension because they're starting to hear their neighbors and friends talk about their refunds are lower, or maybe they're owing for the first time in several years. And depending on where you live, your deduction levels and things like, local income tax and property tax, some of those things are affecting people's ability to have a higher level of itemized deductions than they've had in the past. So I think that apprehension is going into it. So people maybe are a little more realistic, thinking, well, I'm not going to get that $3,000 refund this year. It may be more along the lines of $1,000. And understanding, does that mean that I was in control of my money throughout the year, and that's actually a better thing for me? Or is the tax refund a method of sort of forced savings that helps people who have, maybe impulse control problems have that windfall so that they can do things like chip away at debt, credit cards, and paying off their house quicker and things like that.
So I know we're right here at the very 1st of March. I don't know if I would call this early, but we're not in April yet, so that's good. But I know it came up last week when I was doing the Houston Hispanic Foundation Career and Education Day when FAFSA came out and people were talking about getting your taxes done. What recommendations do you have for people to navigate the filing season easily and accurately?
Yeah, ask questions. Keep a list. Start making a list of questions you have about what things mean, because sometimes we walk through life, especially with a topic like this that's fairly complicated, and most of us are ashamed to admit we may not know something. But make a list and ask your tax preparer, or if you're doing your own taxes, use that question box. Ask those questions. Read all the information so that you can educate yourself with that. And I would say, before you even file, before you even go into the meeting with your tax accountant, start thinking about your 2019 tax liability. Go fill out that W-4. A lot of us put it off last year. A lot of us liked that extra money we got in our paychecks, but that, I think, can be a great asset to folks. And go ahead and fill that out. And the earlier you get started in 2019 for your 2019 tax liability, the less painful that is, because $50 a paycheck all year is better than having to hold out a couple of thousand at the end of the year.
I love that. So those tips you gave: ask questions, keep a list, already be thinking about 2019 and getting your exemptions and all of that lined up so that it doesn't bite you in the tail at the end of the year. All really, really good things there. So let's pivot once again, because one of the things that you guys talk about is financial infidelities. Well, what are the common? First of all, what are financial infidelities, and then what are the common types that you see people commit?
Yeah, well, this is a big one. NEFE does lots of polls. We do lots of sort of real kind of old-fashioned research. This is the one that people talk about a lot because I think it resonates with a lot of people. So financial infidelity is, did someone in the relationship hide money, have secret accounts, make purchases without telling their significant other, and it's common. It's 2 in 5. So 41% of Americans admit to it. Now, this is the ones who admit to it, to lying to their partner about their finances. And we've been doing this survey for several years, and it continues to climb, the number of people. And it's fairly balanced between male and female. It's just a couple of percentage points different. And then of those, 75% say that the financial deception had an effect on the relationship. So, this is an important, when you're talking about 40% of about 320-some million people, that's a lot of money lying going on. And it can cause problems for relationships, but that sense of, trust and so forth. And a lot of it really stems from what I probably should have said earlier in this interview is money is something that some of us were socialized to not really talk about, or to not, or we're ashamed to ask questions because we don't like to not know, or we don't like to be perceived in not knowing. This is another one of those instances where I think fear, embarrassment actually fuels that indiscretion, where they're afraid they're going to be negatively judged.
Wow, that is, as a financial advisor on the retirement side, I can see the end effect of this quite a bit when people aren't sharing information with their spouse, and maybe they pass away and they're leaving them a financial puzzle versus setting them up. What are the effects that you see? Are you seeing these infidelities have on the quality of people's relationship?
Yeah, sometimes it can actually lead to divorce. It can lead to separation. It causes that tension, and it's any level of mistrust in a relationship is going to cause some sort of fissure there, where you're thinking, do I need to start peeking in those statements, or on the other side, it actually is a lot easier to hide money than it used to be, because you can get, you don't get statements in the mail much anymore. A lot of us don't. You can just log in and pay something without your husband or wife or significant other seeing that. So it's actually easier to lie about that. But when you think about the fact that almost half, 44%, are afraid to have this discussion, because they don't want to be judged, that says something on a couple of levels. It says we don't have a healthy relationship to be able to talk about this topic. But on the other side of that is, 1 in 3 say that finances, even though that they're in a combined committed relationship, that money should remain private.
It's definitely, I think when you said earlier, fear and embarrassment, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. It's one of these things that sometimes it's difficult to approach, even as a financial advisor, when a couple comes in and they got separate bank accounts. It's an iffy gray area, but again, if they're not communicating, at least on some level, they're putting their spouses in a bad situation if they don't know what's going on. So let me ask this: what are the best practices for avoiding financial infidelities, and if they've already been committed, what are the best ways to remedy them?
Well, if it's happened already, just know that this conversation is going to be stressful. We a lot of us tend to avoid conversations that are going to create an uncomfortable environment or tension, or maybe even raising our voices from time to time. But accept that it's going to be stressful. Don't ever sabotage your partner, though. Don't just trap them somewhere and say, we've got to talk and we've got to talk now. Try to do it in a way where you want to understand the foundation of how do we get to this place. And sometimes it's because someone just didn't want to get approval because they wanted to go buy that thing, whatever that thing was, or continuously running up debt. But maybe it's a needing to better understand each other and what they like to spend money on. We have a quiz on one of our websites called the Life Values Quiz, and a sociologist developed it through a cool research project. And it really helps you understand, are you the person who spends money on home decor, or are you the person who spends money on the jet ski? Do you like your environment spending money? Do you like spending money on? And foundationally understanding each other and what motivates you and the things you want to spend money on that are the fun things in your life and the things that give you, some joy and activities and things with your home. Understanding that about each other, I think, is a really good way to start. But just being open about that and sharing conversations about bills and being able to be equitable about it. Sometimes it may be because, if one person makes significantly more than the other may feel that they never have money to do anything fun or anything to pamper themselves. And understanding that proportionately, maybe that needs to be a conversation in how you separate or how you contribute to the expenses, but also how do you contribute to the joy that you spend money on.
Very, very good advice. Billy, we're hitting towards the end of the show here. For listeners, we're speaking with Billy Hensley. He is the CEO and president of the National Endowment for Financial Education. We will have a link to their website on the podcast notes. But before we go, I did want to kind of circle back around when we were talking about the quality of financial life. I know the last quarter of last year we had a lot of volatility in the market.
Yes. Yeah.
What effect has the recent volatility in the market had on the quality of people's financial lives?
Well, you've got about a quarter of people who just don't pay attention. They're just kind of like, oh yeah, I guess that's happening. I don't really know. Thinking about it like that. But you've got around half of citizens who say it makes them they're used to the volatility, or they know in the long term that it'll work itself out. And then about the remaining percentage of people, another quarter, a little more, say it stresses them out about their financial security. And, that could be just because, you're seeing that number go up and down and you're constantly looking at it if it's a 401k balance, or if you're nearing retirement and you're seeing that balance drop significantly and what that's going to mean for your future stability. But you've got about half that know that to ride it out, and about a quarter who are scared, and a quarter who just don't look.
Wow. I know I deal a lot of people who are already in retirement or they're right before retirement, so it's a different level of anxiety there. But
oh yeah.
So, and we've got just a few more minutes here. But does the research show any demographic less optimistic about their financial future?
Women are a little less optimistic because I think it ties back to some of they have a higher percentage, women have a higher percentage of living paycheck to paycheck. So if you're already stressed about money, if you're already, worried about the next bill comes due and what day your paycheck is on, that's going to skew your vision for the future.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Money Matters Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, visit us on the web at www.moneymatterspodcast.com. Drop us a line on SpeakPipe on the right-hand corner. It will receive any voicemails, questions, thoughts, concerns that you have about the show. In addition to this, we recently launched a Patreon campaign. Click on the Donate Now tab to hit the tip jar and find out what Patreon's campaign is all about.